Part 1. Across rehearsals. It was the kind of day that didn't call attention to itself. The sun hung lazily in the sky, half-heartedly pushing through a gorse of clouds, and the schoolyard of St. Alden's Preparatory was filled with the light rustle of children's laughter and scattered parents making quiet small talk. Clara adjusted her scarf absent-mindedly as she walked toward the auditorium. Her daughter Anya was in the upcoming school play, a small but bright sunflower in the ensemble. These tiny things, school plays, weekend picnics, bedtime whispers, had become her world, and she cherished them. She reached the entrance of the school hall, stepped inside and blinked as her eyes adjusted to the dim light of the old theatre. Children were running around in various costumes, teachers and volunteers clapping and gesturing. And then, without warning, her breath caught. Standing near the back row, arms folded, was a face that memory hadn't dared summon for years. Ethan. He turned as if he had felt her breath hitch from across the room. Their eyes met. A moment passed that stretched far longer than it had any right to. The years hadn't taken away the way he stood, a bit crooked in his posture, that small smile he always wore when caught off guard. He looked different, wiser maybe. But the recognition was instant. He gave a cautious nod, and Clara walked toward him, her heart thudding with something that wasn't quite panic and wasn't quite joy. Hi, she said, and then added quickly, "It's been a while." Ethan chuckled softly. "About 12 years, give or take." 12, she echoed. "God." They stood in the soft noise of rehearsing children and stage direction. For a moment, neither knew what to say. "You here for the play?" Ethan finally asked, unnecessarily. Clara smiled. "Anya, she's a sunflower. You?" "My son, Liam. He's a tree." "A tree and a sunflower," Clara murmured, laughing gently. "Small world." Ethan smiled at her, slower this time. "Smaller than we thought. Same school, same grade, same play. How did we never run into each other?" Clara shrugged, still trying to grasp the strangeness of it all. Different routines, maybe. Different corners of the same city. Same city, he echoed thoughtfully. All these years. There was no need to talk about what they had been. It floated in the space between them, unnamed but present, like the ghost of a season gone too soon. They had once been something more than friends. Something unspeakably tender. It had ended suddenly, for reasons they'd never quite articulated to anyone, not even themselves. They spoke about their children, about schools and sleep schedules, tantrums and teething. They laughed. The awkwardness softened, as though time had gently erased the sharp edges of their shared past. They talked about their spouses, Clara's husband, a kind pediatrician with a love for old jazz, and Ethan's wife, a brilliant software architect who had designed her own herb garden on the balcony. Both happy, both settled, both in another life, once completely entangled with each other. As the rehearsal break was called and the children scurried off the stage, Ethan turned to her, his voice quieter now. "I'm leaving, Clara. Next month." She looked up. "Leaving? Moving to Canada. Big project. We're planning to settle there. Schools, house hunting, the whole deal." Her throat tightened, and she wasn't entirely sure why. "You're really going?" He nodded. "Yeah. Been in the works a while, but it's real now." Something fragile stirred in her chest. For years, they had been unknowingly in the same city, breathing the same air, raising children in parallel lives that never crossed. And now, just as the coincidence brought them face to face, He was going again, this time much farther. She smiled, and it was both sincere and sad. "That's wonderful. I'm really happy for you." He looked at her with a depth that wasn't quite longing, but something close. "Thanks. I'm happy too. I think we'll like it there." They stood side by side, watching the children gather again on stage. "Funny, isn't it?" Clara said quietly. "How life loops around." "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice soft. "Sometimes it loops. Sometimes it just closes." When the rehearsal ended, the goodbye was gentle. There was no promise to meet again, no exchange of numbers. Just two smiles filled with something wordless and warm. Clara walked Anya to the car, holding her small hand tightly, and looked up at the quieting sky. Ethan and Liam disappeared into another car, another street, another tomorrow. Sometimes the people who once meant everything drift through the same city for years without meeting. And sometimes the universe offers one brief, coincidental afternoon, a reminder, a whisper of the past, and a soft, poignant farewell. And with that, the day faded. Clara tucked her daughter in that night with a kiss, a story, and a lingering thought of a tree and a sunflower on a school stage, bathed in light. Part 2. Before the last picture. 12 years ago, the world felt more alive. It was the final year of university, and the campus had a rhythm all its own, guitar strings echoing through dorm windows, half-drunk coffee cups left behind in lecture halls, and laughter rising from grassy patches where people sunned themselves between classes. In the middle of it all were Clara and Ethan. They weren't a couple. That was the first thing they'd always say. With a playful roll of the eyes and a smile, they thought no one noticed. Just friends, but the kind who shared earphones on the campus bus, passed notebooks with scribbled poems, and fought over movie choices, only to fall asleep halfway through them on each other's shoulders. There were Friday nights filled with student parties and glowing string lights. The two of them arriving separately, but always leaving together. Sunday mornings meant long walks to the cafe, 2 blocks from the hostel, where they had split one overpriced almond croissant and laugh about nothing, everything. They had their own language, silent looks that said more than sentences, small jokes, only they understood. Their friends teased them mercilessly. Just friends? Someone or the other would laugh during every group lunch. Sure, and the sky isn't blue. But Clara and Ethan never crossed that line. Maybe they were scared to. Or maybe they had convinced themselves that friendship like this, deep, raw and beautiful, was more valuable than any what if. Until it wasn't. It started small, the way these things often do. A missed call here, a forgotten text there, a plan that one made and the other cancelled without explanation. Ethan had grown close to a new circle of friends that Clara found aloof, and she started spending more time with a project partner who made Ethan oddly quiet whenever his name came up. It wasn't jealousy, not exactly. It was something messier. Fear, insecurity, the slow unraveling of unspoken expectations they hadn't even admitted to themselves. Ego with sharp teeth and a patient crawl settled between them. Then came the fight. It wasn't loud. There was no shouting. Just a conversation after class that turned brittle. A few words that landed wrong. A tone too cold. A reply too sharp. Ethan accused her of drifting away. Clara told him he was too arrogant to notice anyone but himself. It escalated from misunderstanding to bitterness faster than either could control. From that day, something shifted permanently. In group settings, they became distant echoes of who they had been, sitting at the same table, talking to the same people, never once meeting each other's eyes. Their friends noticed the silence but said little. Some relationships are too complicated to explain, even to those who saw them from the outside. By the time the end of term approached, Clara had made a scrapbook of sorts, capturing the last glimpses of college life. Everyone posed for pictures in the quadrangle, arms wrapped around each other, tears and laughter tangled. Everyone except Ethan. She didn't ask him to join. He didn't offer. Maybe they both thought the other didn't care. Maybe they were both wrong. On the last day, as students packed and hugged goodbye, Ethan walked past her in the corridor, a box of books under his arm. Their shoulders nearly brushed. She glanced up. He didn't look at her. Or maybe he did. A split second after she had already turned away. They left without a word. No closure, no confrontation. Just an open wound covered in pride. And yet, in quiet moments, between jobs, relationships, children, both sometimes thought of the other. A song that used to play on his old speaker. The smell of cinnamon at a bakery window. The ache of remembering someone who once knew every version of you, the silence that came after. Neither reached out. Neither said what they truly felt. I miss you. I'm sorry. We were too much to let go like that. But anger, when fed long enough, becomes armor. And they wore it well. Until one day, 12 years later, in the familiar chaos of a school auditorium, the armor cracked. Not fully, but just enough for two people, once more than friends, to meet again under stage lights, surrounded by children playing trees and sunflowers. And maybe that was the closure they never had. Or maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a new chapter. Shorter, quieter, and free of expectations. Just a nod, just a smile, just a memory of what once was. Part 3. Things we didn't say. That night, after the rehearsal, Clara stood at the kitchen counter staring into a half-drunk cup of tea gone cold. Anya was already asleep, her sunflower costume folded neatly on the dresser, the faintest trace of glitter still clinging to her cheeks. The house was quiet, too quiet. And in that silence, Clara let her mind wander back to the afternoon, to the man she never thought she'd see again, Ethan. 12 years. And still, something inside her had remembered the exact shape of his voice, the tilt of his smile, the way he looked at her during the rehearsal, with something behind his eyes that felt too careful. He hadn't told her everything. She knew it instinctively. The way he'd spoken about Canada, measured, rehearsed. Something about it felt like a story designed to reassure. And she hadn't questioned it, because she hadn't told him everything either. "We're happy," she had said when he asked about her husband. But the truth was, there had been no we for a long time. After Anya was born, things had quietly, painfully fallen apart. Differences that seemed small in the beginning grew into walls. Arguments, silences, drifting years. And finally, an ending. Not loud, not dramatic, just tired. She'd been on her own since Anya was 3. Strong, composed, and quieter than she used to be. She had stopped explaining herself to people, including him. But now, as she stared into the night outside her kitchen window, she wished she had told him, just once, that she understood loss too. Across town, Ethan sat on the balcony of his apartment, a blanket around his shoulders and a slow breath in his chest. His heart had been failing for the last year. It started with fatigue, then shortness of breath, then a sinking kind of exhaustion that no sleep could fix. The diagnosis had come like a quiet verdict, one of those that changes your whole life, not with thunder, but with a whisper. His uncle in Toronto had passed a year ago, leaving him a small house and enough property to begin again. His doctors thought the colder climate, better care, and fewer stresses would help, maybe even slow things down. But he knew the truth. His time was a shrinking horizon. And today, seeing Clara again, it shook something loose in him. He hadn't expected to feel so much. Not after all these years, not after everything. He thought about telling her, about saying, "I'm leaving, not for work, but because I might not have much time left." But something in her face, bright and tired, proud and kind, held him back. He didn't want to be a sadness in her story again. He didn't want pity or sympathy. He just wanted the memory of them, of what they were, to be soft, not sharp. He stared into the city lights and thought about how she had looked at Anya, how gently she'd spoken about motherhood, how she still listened with her eyes. There were things he would carry with him to that new country. The sound of her laugh, the way she had whispered, "Funny, isn't it?" Like it still mattered. And though he hadn't said it, he'd known. She had changed. There was a pain she had never spoken of, but it echoed in her silences, in the way she smiled with effort. Maybe they were both a little broken. Maybe that's why fate had given them one last afternoon, one last curtain call. He wouldn't see her again, and maybe that was okay. Some reunions aren't meant to last forever. Some are just meant to mend something we didn't know was still hurting. But as he stepped back inside and switched off the lights, he allowed himself one quiet truth. He had loved her, still did, in a quiet, nameless way. And she had once loved him too, if not the way people expected, then at least in a way that stayed. Months later, Clara would find herself walking through the park on a windy afternoon, Anya skipping ahead. She would pause near the lake, the wind brushing her face, and wonder if Ethan was standing near some window in Toronto, watching snowfall. They never wrote, never called, but that one day stayed with her, tucked deep into her memory, like an old letter never sent. And maybe that was all it needed to be. A soft, quiet ending to a story that never really ended at all.